Hi, this is Gary. Welcome to our Bible study group. We're just starting a study on the Gospel of Mark. And the Gospel of Mark is unique because it gives us Peter's perspective into Jesus' personality and his message. Peter learned to love and follow Jesus, and so will we as we study together the Gospel of Mark. All right, so we are in Mark chapter 5, and we're going to meet three special people. So let's read verses 1 to 20. So remember now that in the previous chapter that there was a storm, and Jesus' boat was being swamped, but he was asleep. And so they've come through that, and now they are entering the east side of the Sea of Galilee. Okay? Then they came to the other side of the sea, into the region of the Gerasenes. And when he got out of the boat, immediately, this is Mark, we always know, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one was able to bind him any more, even with a chain, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been torn apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Constantly, night and day, among the tombs, and in the mountains, he was crying out and gashing himself with stones. And seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran up and bowed down before him, and crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What do I have to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you, by God, do not torment me." For he had been saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And he was asking him, "What is your name?" And he said to him, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he began pleading with him earnestly not to send them out of the region. Now there was a large herd of swine feeding nearby on the mountain. And the demons pleaded with him, saying, "Send us into the swine so that we may enter them." And Jesus gave them permission, and coming out, the unclean spirits entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea, about 2,000 of them, and they were drowned in the sea. And their herdsmen ran away and reported it in the city and the countryside, and the people came to see what had happened. And they came to Jesus and observed the demon-possessed man sitting down, clothed and in his right mind, the very man who had the legion, and they became frightened. And those who had seen it recounted to them how this had happened to the demon-possessed man and all about the swine. And they began to plead with him to leave their region. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed was pleading with him that he might accompany him. And he did not let him, but he said to him, "Go home to your people and report to them what great things the Lord has done for you, and how he has had mercy on you." And he went away and began to preach in the Decapolis what great things Jesus had done for him. And everyone was marveling. This is the story of the first missionary to the Gentiles. Why do we always think of it as the demon-possessed man? That's his old life. His new life in Christ is the first missionary to the Gentiles.
Because there's more written on his old way. That's why we focus.
Yeah. What was the real miracle? Obviously, the ridding him of the demons, but the miracle is a changed life. And one that he now begins to proclaim throughout the 10 cities, the Decapolis. And this is a Gentile area. I know that oftentimes it's been taught that Jesus let the demons go into the swine because the Jews shouldn't have swine anyway. But this is not a Jewish area. This is a Greek settlers area, 10 cities in the area.
I wonder how the guy that owned all those sheep felt about them
All the swine.
honors. Yeah, I know.
And we know how he felt because we find out at the end of the story, we don't want you around here.
Oh, yeah.
So Jesus, having just survived an attack out on the sea, and then the first thing that happens when they come to the shore is the demon-possessed man. This is another attack. And look at the method of attack. The demon-possessed man goes right on the offensive, directly challenging Jesus' authority. First of all, he names Jesus, Son of the Most High. You're Jesus. What do you have to do with me? An ancient superstition going way back into this area and before was that if you knew a person's full name, you had some kind of power over them. And this was not a Jewish tradition, but just a pagan superstition. And so that's the first attack. I know who you are. But what does Jesus do? He immediately flips the script. And he says, what is your name? And he forces, in terms of the superstition, he forces the man to reveal his name. Legion, for we are many. So what Jesus does is he's declaring, in the face of this attack, he is declaring absolute power. He is in control of this situation. And then there's a second attack. We are legion. Now this was a Roman military term that can mean up to 6,000 personnel.
6,000.
Up to 6,000,
I
yes.
thought 1,000, but probably because there's 1,000.
Yeah, and of course through Roman history the
6,000.
size of the legion changed and how they did it. And sometimes it had support personnel and all that, but it could be up to 6,000 people. And so this is another threat. We are more than you. We can overpower you. And
Not on your life.
so try to intimidate Jesus with numbers. But of course that doesn't work either. And as Jesus is saying, get out, the demons then become agitated. Well, don't send us out into the region, send us into those pigs. And the whole idea of the fate of the pigs is really to illustrate what Satan's aim is in this life. And that is, and John tells us in John 10:10, the aim of Satan is to steal what is not theirs, to kill, to destroy God's creation, to do whatever they can to come between man and God. But Christ came to heal and deliver. And we see that the man, to the great surprise of the villagers that come out, he's sitting dressed and in his right mind. But this brings even more fear to the outside people who, of course, are wondering about these pigs and how are we going to recover from this disaster, financial disaster.
Barbecue.
And they're more afraid of Jesus than they were of the demon-possessed man. They were used to him. Just, keep your distance. Don't go out there at night. And they contained that situation. But they could not contain the power of Jesus. And they were afraid. You got to go. You can't stay here. But think about this for a moment. Jesus makes the trip all the way across the Sea of Galilee, through the storm, to minister to this one man, and then goes all the way back across the sea. But in ministering to this one man, what has he done? This is one of the very few times that Mark records that Jesus does not say, don't tell anyone. Instead, he says, go and tell what the Lord has done for you. And he does, through the whole 10 cities area, the Decapolis. He, the first Gentile missionary.
Remember that crazy guy? Well,
And they may have all known who he was. You know, he grew up in the village. He grew up in the area. You know, they probably knew who he was. All right, let's move to verses 21 to 34. And when Jesus had crossed over again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him. And so he stayed by the seashore. And one of the synagogue officials named Jairus came up, and on seeing him fell at his feet, and pleaded with him earnestly, saying, my little daughter is at the point of death. Please come, that by coming you may lay your hands on her, so that she will be saved and live. And he went off with him, and a large crowd was following him and pressing in on him. And a woman who had a hemorrhage for 12 years, and had endured much at the hands of the physicians, and had spent all that she had, and not helped at all, but rather had grown worse. After hearing about Jesus, she came up in the crowd behind him and touched his garment. For she was saying, if I just touch his garments, I'll be saved from this. And immediately the flow of her blood was dried up, and she knew within her body that she had been healed of her affliction. And immediately Jesus, there's Mark again, immediately Jesus, perceiving in himself that the power proceeding from him had gone forth, he turned around to the crowd and said, who touched my garments? His disciples were saying to him, you see the crowd pressing in on you, and you say, who touched me? And he was looking around to see the woman who had done this. But the woman, fearing and trembling, aware of what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction. So we meet here a woman dying a slow death and a desperate father. It's hard to imagine two more difficult situations to be living in and happening at the same time. First, we meet Jairus. He was a lay official in the synagogue. Now, a lay official was a person who oversaw the facilities, made the arrangements for the services, made sure all the chairs were set up, the candles in place, that the speaker, was going to be there on time, and, the organizer, that the one that really makes things happen at church, And
it's a lot of work.
yes, it is a lot of work. So you can imagine his pain, begging Jesus to come. This is a high official. This is somebody who's known in town, who has a lot of respect, a lot of power. He kind of speaks for the synagogue. That's pretty big. And he says these words, my little daughter, very affectionate term. If you'll just come and lay your hands on her, I know she'll be healed. Because the word of how Jesus was healing was getting around. And a lot of the times it involved the laying on of hands. We'll talk about that more when we get to the woman with the flow of blood. But think about this desperate father, his joy and his relief and hope. Jesus is going to come. Everything is going to be all right. Jesus is coming. Thank you, Lord, So his hopes are like sky high. And he knows Jesus can help. But we've just got to get him there, And so they are on their way. And the crowd is pressing against Jesus. And then we meet the woman suffering from the flow of blood for 12 years. She's not only suffering from this disease, but she's suffering from the cures of this disease. Because the many doctors who have treated her, I copied off something here from one of the commentaries, that this is an ancient rabbi, Rabbi Yochanan, and this was his cure for the flow of blood. Okay, so this was not an unusual situation. And so this is how they went about treating it. Rabbi Yochanan says, take gum of Alexandria, of alum, and of Corcus hortensis, it must be a plant of some kind, the weight of a zuzu each. Then let them be bruised together and given in wine to the woman that hath an issue of blood. But if this fail, take a Persian onions, 9 bulbs, and boil them in wine, and give it to her to drink, and say, arise from thy flunks. But should this fail, set her in a place where 2 ways meet, and let her hold a cup of wine in her hand, and let somebody come behind her and frighten her, and say, arise from thy flux. And if this should do no good,
Run her over.
and on and on.
Wow.
Then it's going to be vultures after that.
So, and the scripture says that she had spent all her money. She must have had some money to spend. And yet it's all gone now. All gone.
Yeah. Wow.
She was not only poor, but she had to be anemic, exhausted, desperate, not supposed to mix with clean people, not supposed to be in public.
Wow.
And she too had heard the rumors. And the rumor that she had heard was all you have to do is touch his garment. Okay? And then what happens? A reversal of cleanliness. What normally would have been an unclean person touching a clean person would have made the clean person unclean. But this is Jesus, and it's reversed. An unclean person touched a clean person, and she became clean. Can't hardly imagine what she must have experienced in her body, because she knew immediately that she had been healed. But the power, as we know, was from Jesus and not from the cloth. The healing came from himself. And we know that the crowd was pressing up, and yet they weren't healed. But the woman who reached out in faith was healed. Jesus does not let her just float away, but he very publicly draws attention to her. And there are some very good reasons for that. It's important for her sake. First of all, he calls her in a very affectionate term, daughter. And that term is not used anywhere else. That is special for this, a very affectionate and loving term. Daughter, your faith has made you whole. He speaks directly to her, which men didn't talk to women, and especially unclean women, and which we see that Jesus did that all the time. But it was important for her sake that she understood that she had not stolen something, but that what she had received was freely given. So that's number one. Because she could have slunk away and thought that she had gotten her healing illegitimately,
Yeah.
that she had done something, and just something magical had happened. But no, it's the confrontation with Jesus that healed her. And the second thing is she has, because of her acknowledging her, she has gone on record as being healed, which means now she can hold her head up in public, and you wouldn't have the neighbors saying, "Oh yeah, you're just saying you're healed so you can come back in and fake it." But no, everybody knew it was her and that she was healed. So Jesus was doing her a very big, good turn by making it public. As much as it probably was agonizing for the lady, but she's so excited about being healed, I don't think she minded the the attention. But we have a continuation. So let's read from 35 to 43. While he was still speaking, they came from the house of the synagogue official, saying, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher anymore?" But Jesus, overhearing what had been spoken, said to the synagogue official, "Don't be afraid, only believe." And he allowed no one to accompany him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And they came to the house of the synagogue official, and he saw a commotion, people loudly crying and wailing. And he entered in, and he said to them, "Why are you making a commotion and crying? The child has not died, but is asleep." And they began laughing at him, and he put them all out. He took along the child's father and mother and his own companions, and entered the room where the child was. And taking the child by the hand, he said to her, "Talitha cum," which translated means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And immediately the little girl stood up and began to walk, for she was 12 years old. And immediately they were completely astounded. And he gave them strict orders that no one should know about this. And he said that some food should be given to her to eat. So we're back to the tell nobody. Now imagine the torture that Jairus is going through. They're on their way to his house. We have to hurry. She's not going to make it. And while Jesus is ministering to this woman, can you imagine the agony that's going on in his soul? We have to hurry. We have to hurry. We have to hurry. What are we doing? You stopped to heal this woman, but now my daughter has died. And you can picture the messenger coming up. Jairus, don't bother the master.
Yeah.
She died. Can you imagine what his heart did at the moment? Can you put yourself in that situation? So we have here 4 suppositions about how Jesus heals. First of all, Jairus says, "You have to lay hands on my daughter so she'll be healed." And then the woman thinks to herself, "I have to touch his robe." Touch, that has to happen. And then 2 more from Jairus. Jesus has to be physically present. You have to come to my daughter. And the last one is, the patient must be alive. Oh, it's too late. Don't bother. 4 suppositions about how Jesus does his thing. But what's Jesus' response to Jairus? Don't be afraid, only believe. Faith over fear is a very good a very good stance. Faith over fear. Because fear comes from our old nature, things we can't control. But faith comes from our higher nature of God at work in our lives. But now we see that this healing, exactly opposed to the healing of the woman, now it's Peter, James, and John, mother and mom and dad, and Jesus. And they leave the crowd behind. Well, the crowd is slow, but now we're going to hurry with a small group, and we're going to get to the daughter. And when Jesus walks in the door, we see the commotion that's going on. You know, back in the day, showing respect for the dead was raising a ruckus, wailing, and doing whatever things they did. And of course, the more respect, the louder and the longer the wailing went on. But Jesus says this amazing thing. Why he needed to say anything, I'm not sure. Maybe it makes sense at the end of the story. But why are you making all this commotion? She's not dead. She's asleep. And then you see the immediate turnaround of the professional mourners who have no dog in the race. They're just getting paid. It immediately turns to derision and laughter, like, what? You don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, I think we know when we see a dead person, this is our business. So only Peter, James, and John, the inner circle of saints, right? The great men of faith of the disciple group get to enter in. But I wonder if it wasn't more about these three guys need to see this miracle for their faith. They need to see what the power of God can do. Because they're going to go out and do it pretty quickly. Jesus speaks in his native Aramaic tongue, Talitha cum. I'm probably saying that wrong. And Mark translates it for us. Remember, Mark, one of the marks of Mark is that he when Jesus speaks, it's in his native tongue, and Mark translates. Little girl, get up. And she does. And she gets up and she walks. Can you imagine mom and dad? But then he tells them this amazing thing. Tell no one. Now, how do you hide a 12-year-old girl who just got healed, and she's going to be playing with the neighbor's kids, and she's going to be running around the house? How do you explain this? Jesus had given the mourners an out. Well, she really was asleep. But you see, they didn't see the miracle. Yeah. They didn't understand. They didn't know. They only knew that, oh, she really was asleep. So let's just do a short summary of three people here. Three people fall at Jesus' feet. Jairus, the the missionary to the Gentiles. Mm-hmm. You've got to start thinking about him in new life.
That's true.
Not old life. And then the woman falls at his feet as well. Mark tells us that the little girl was 12 years old. The woman had suffered from the flow of blood for 12 years. Oh my. That's an interesting little connection. I don't know what it means exactly, but but that Mark would include that kind of information is interesting. But let's look at the contrast between Jairus and the woman with the issue of blood. Let's look at their situations. Jairus was important, respected. The woman had no name. It was an outcast. Opposite ends of the society they were in. Jairus was wealthy. The woman, if she had any money, she didn't anymore. He had spent it all. Jairus was very public and with a sense of entitlement. I'm important. Jesus, come and heal my daughter. But the woman was secret within herself. If I just touch his robe, she was ashamed to have attention drawn to herself. Jairus, his healing of his daughter was delayed, much to his torture. But the healing of the woman was immediate. Now look at the reversal of this last one. Jairus was told, tell no one. But the woman, in public, daughter, your faith has made you whole. There is no nailing down how to do a miracle. Jesus did miracles in all kinds of ways.
And for all kinds of people.
And all kinds of people.
We
Yes.
hope.
Not just the deserving, not the ones who were good people, but the outcasts, the sinners, the lepers.
Not just the outcast and sinners, but for the good people too.
That's right. That's exactly right. So I just want to draw your attention in closing to the last scene. The little girl is up and dancing by this time, getting hugs from mom and dad. And Jesus says, give her some food. Let's think about that for a minute. She'd probably been in bed for days. How many? Who knows how long? But it could have been for days, and her body needed nourishment. And Jesus knew that. But think about us when we go through spiritual times of doubt and fear, maybe a great trial, a mourning, where our spirit is depleted. What is the answer for us?
Eat more ice cream.
Chocolate and coffee, I know.
There you go. That's all there is.
But to be super spiritual about this, what is it that we need when we have come through a devastating time?
We need Jesus' presence. We need his peace and his joy that come with
Yes,
his presence
Yes.
that he so generously shares with us.
yes. We need his food, his spiritual food, his nourishment to our spirits.
We need a repentant heart.
Yes, yes. We need to be sustained not just by the miracle of God bringing us through that time, but a daily bread that strengthens us day by day.